For this unit, we're going to combine the discussion of both water and minerals. The first half will cover all the major minerals that the body needs, and then we'll discuss the importance of water. Now, with the minerals, just as with vitamins, I think it's really important when you study for this, a great study strategy is to make out note cards. On the front side of a note card, put the mineral that you're trying to learn more about, and then on the back side, write some characteristics down about that mineral. Where is it found in the body? What are its major functions in the body? Again, many of these minerals have multiple functions, so try and focus on the one or two functions that it's best known for. And then, a few good resources, food resources of them. I'll often ask a question like, this is the most abundant mineral in your body, and it's found in milk and other dairy products. So I might combine both a characteristic of a mineral along with some good food sources. The answer for that would be calcium. So look for questions like that where I ask about the most, the biggest function, or it's the most abundant, or it's best known for controlling hypertension, or whatever it may be. So know its major role or where it's found in the body, and then also a good food source. Put that on the note card, and then just flip through them a little bit every day, and before you know it, you will know all of the major minerals that our body uses. So minerals, just in comparison to vitamins, minerals are similar to vitamins in that we don't need them in any great quantity every day. We do need them every day, but really in pretty small quantities. In fact, many people, when they take a multivitamin, it also includes minerals as well for their daily dose. So you don't need a very large amount every day. Just like vitamins. They differ from vitamins in that they're not organic compounds. They're inorganic, which means they don't have a carbon base to them. They are the basic elements that you find on the periodic table. They're what we call homogeneous. That means they're the same throughout. The iron that's found in your red blood cells is the same iron that's used to make the steel frame of your car. So the element itself is the same, whether it's found in the table salt on your kitchen table, or the sodium and chloride floating around in your blood vessels. So they're naturally occurring compounds or naturally occurring atoms. They're the basic chemical elements that you identify in any chemistry class on the periodic table, and they make up a very small percentage of the body. And you can see from this chart, you can see how many grams are found in the body. This is where a pound is to kind of give you a reference point. And you can see that if you were to chop your body up into its basic elemental structures, that you have just over a pound of phosphorus, a couple pounds of calcium, and all these other minerals. You have well less than a pound, maybe half a pound of potassium, sulfur. So all told, combining together all the major minerals and just the trace minerals, your body weight, a typical 150-pound adult, just maybe 4 or 5 pounds is actually made up of minerals. The bulk of your body is actually water weight and then some other organic compounds. But minerals don't really make up a very large percentage of your body. So let's start with the most abundant one, though. Calcium, which of the minerals that make up your body, calcium is the most abundant. And about 99% of it is stored in our bones and our teeth. And there's about 1% of it that's in our blood system and they're inside of our cells. So from that, you can extrapolate that obviously calcium is very important in bone and teeth structure. It plays a role in smooth muscle contraction, and some other roles in some nerve impulses and things like that, and neuromuscular connections. But its major roles, without a doubt, are in the structural components in our bone and teeth, and then also with that smooth muscle contraction. Some of those other peripheral roles, not that they're not important, but they're not the major roles of calcium. Essentially, bone acts as a calcium reserve. So if you are short calcium in your diet, your body will leach calcium from your bones to meet the needs of your blood calcium. This is a reason why it's so important to make sure that you're getting all the calcium you need every day. If your bones are trying to grow and there's not enough calcium, it can slow down the rate of growth. Or if you are pregnant or nursing the amount of calcium you need is much, much greater for growing that fetus or for breastfeeding. And if you're not getting enough calcium, you will start to see the onset of thinning of your bones, loss of bone density. It used to be said back in the olden days, a tooth for every child, and that referred to how women, long before they had good nutrition, every time they got pregnant, they would lose a tooth. And that's actually very true. I had a grandmother who grew up during the Depression and was very poor, and I remember her telling me that when I was a little girl, how every time she got pregnant, she lost a tooth. And that was a direct result of lack of calcium in her diet. The baby got the calcium, and she lost it. She lost the calcium, and her teeth started to fall out. And by the time I knew her, she didn't have any of her molars left. She had to chew all of her food with her front teeth and her incisors, and her canine teeth. That was all she had left. So it's nice to have your bones and teeth there as a reserve, but you want to make sure you're not tapping into that reserve unwittingly because you're not getting enough calcium in your diet. When you see calcium and phosphate separate, they actually can be dissolved in liquid, but they will form crystalline salts in the form of hydroxyapatite crystals, and that adds the rigidity to the bone. We see the same sort of thing in the teeth, except we have the fluoride component in the teeth, and you see fluorapatite in the teeth. So both of those are crystalline structures. They're both very hard. Enamel, the fluoride compound in the teeth that makes the enamel is harder than bone. It is the hardest substance in your body, but both of them are quite rigid and quite hard. Good sources of calcium. A lot of you probably know this just from growing up. You hear this in elementary school and in your school systems. And your mom probably always told you to drink your milk or eat your cheese. Most dairy products are great sources of calcium. So any milk, cheese, yogurt, cottage cheese, all of those things are very good. Broccoli is also a great source of calcium. A lot of people don't think of broccoli, but broccoli is a great source. There's some other green leafy vegetables that have calcium as well. There aren't any real toxicity issues that are known of. You can have some muscle cramping if you have too much calcium, but really the big deficiency disease associated with calcium is osteoporosis. And here you can see normal bone structure is actually quite porous. Again, the crystalline structure is very rigid, but remember, bone is highly vascularized. You have a blood supply that goes through your bone. And so if you were to break a bone, you would rip a lot of blood vessels too, besides breaking that bone. So bone itself is quite spongy looking when you look at it. But if you lose bone density or you don't get enough calcium, you can start to see that spongy appearance becomes a little too prominent. And as you get more and more of the spongy-like characteristic with the holes getting bigger and bigger, that means those rigid walls are getting thinner and thinner, and you're more likely to get a fracture or a break. And that's very common in elderly, especially elderly women, after they go through menopause. It's harder for them to lay down bone mass, and so their bones tend to get thinner, and they're more predisposition to getting a hip fracture. The second most abundant mineral in the body is phosphorus. And again, the bulk of phosphorus is stored in our bones and teeth. Again, the phosphorus and the calcium form those crystalline structures that make up the bulk of our bone and our teeth. But we do also see phosphorus in the form of a buffer in the blood. Phosphorus salts or phosphate buffers are very common in helping to maintain our blood pH. That's what a buffer does. A buffer helps to maintain pH. So phosphorus plays a role in buffering the blood. It's also part of our DNA and our RNA structure. If you look at a model of DNA, it's made up of a sugar phosphate backbone. It has a repeating deoxyribose sugar, and then it's bonded to a phosphate, which is a phosphorus with 4 oxygens on it. So we do need phosphate or phosphorus to make that phosphate molecule. Also, ATP. When we break down our sugars and our fats and our proteins, when we break all that down for energy, the energy molecule that we make is called adenosine triphosphate. So ATP, that's kind of our energy currency of the cell. This is how our cell pays to get things done. This is like the dollars and cents of doing business inside the cell. So ATP is the molecule that we make through the metabolism of our energy yielding molecules. And that P there stands for phosphate. That's where some of our phosphorus goes. Also, again, remember back to when we covered lipids, the phospholipid, which makes up the cell membrane, you need that phosphate group on those polar heads of the lipids to create that phospholipid bilayer. And then again, of course, remember back, proteins, some proteins do contain phosphorus in their side chain because some amino acids do have phosphorus. We do see phosphorus present in proteins. So if you think about this, you think about all of these sources of phosphorus: cell membranes, protein, energy molecules, DNA, RNA. There's a lot of good sources out there for phosphorus. You really never hear of somebody having a deficiency in phosphorus. They're very limited, but usually it's associated with overall, in general, malnourishment and nutritional deficiencies across the board. And when you do see it, it can result in some muscle weakness and body pain. But a phosphorus deficiency is just not that common, because anytime you eat any sort of food that has cellular structure, whether it's plant cells, animal cells, mushrooms, fungi, any of that kind of stuff, all of our cells contain DNA and RNA. All of our cells contain protein. So any sort of good protein source, any sort of plant or animal cellular tissue, it's going to be a good source of phosphorus, since that's where phosphorus is found. So not a lot of issues with people getting enough phosphorus. Potassium. Potassium is, the symbol for potassium on the periodic table is K, and it is a positively charged ion inside the body's cell, and it plays multiple roles in electrolyte and fluid balance. Electrolyte refers to all those charged particles or those ions floating around in our body. An ion is just a charged particle. It's an element on the periodic table that has either gained or lost electrons, and as a result has a positive or a negative charge. And potassium is our principal positively charged ion, the main one that we see in controlling electrolyte and fluid balance. A lot of people who exercise for long periods of time, a lot of marathon runners, they will, along their route, they will grab a banana and along with their water, because bananas are high in potassium. Lots of times you lose potassium when you sweat, and they want to replace those electrolytes. They want to replace that potassium. If you look at your Gatorade bottles, some of the different, Powerade bottles, they talk about, replacing electrolytes. Well, they're talking about replacing potassium and sodium as well, because we lose those when we exercise hard. So we need to replace those, otherwise we start to have difficulty with muscle cramping, and in extreme cases you can have trouble with heartbeat irregularity as well. I always remember potassium because potassium is what they use in lethal injections. When you think about death row inmates who get the plunger pushed down on them and they get that IV fluid, it's potassium that they're given. What they essentially do is give them such a massive dose of potassium that it screws up the electrolyte balance across the heart cells. And so the heart cells kind of get confused and don't know what to do, and they kind of go into a shock where the heart can no longer coordinate beating anymore. It loses that neuromuscular control because of that flooding of potassium ions. So that's how I always remembered the role of potassium. It helps with fluid and electrolyte balance, but it's really a major player in heartbeat regulation as well. And as I mentioned, bananas are a good source. Also, a lot of your melons, your cantaloupes and things like that are good sources. Potatoes get overlooked. Lots of times potatoes can be a great source. Most varieties of potatoes actually have more potassium than a banana. A lot of people think of bananas as that great potassium source, but potatoes actually have more potassium. Avocados as well are a great source. And like I said, you can have muscle pain, muscle weakness, cramping, confusion, irregular heartbeat if you're deficient in potassium. Sulfur, which often takes on the form of sulfate, which is it's just a polyatomic ion where it has some oxygens with it, but it still has that sulfur component. We need this for many different sulfur-containing compounds. When you look at the B vitamin thiamine, it contains sulfur. A lot of our different antioxidants, again, antioxidants help to be preferentially oxidized to prevent free radicals from oxidizing our cells, and that limits the chances of getting cancer. So certain antioxidants contain sulfur. Also, those sulfur-containing amino acids, again, a lot of our harder proteins like our skin and our hair, our nails, especially our hair and our nails, have very rigid protein structures. Feel your fingernails right now and feel how rigid they are. They're a protein just like your skin, but your skin is much more elastic and pliable. But they're both made up of protein. They both have tons of protein in them. But the reason that those fingernails feel so much more rigid is because of the high sulfur content. The sulfur will cross-link with other sulfur-containing amino acids, and almost create almost like a chicken wire fencing of rigidity within that protein. So it makes it very rough, very rigid, and very durable. So we need sulfur to help us make those sulfur-containing proteins. And again, I should just mention, I don't have it listed here, but again, just think about what would be good sources. I don't have good sources listed because, again, we don't tend to see deficiencies in sulfur, and that's because sulfur is in so many different things. If sulfur is a component of proteins because of the sulfur-containing amino acids, just about any protein is a good source of sulfur. So we don't really see deficiencies, just like with the phosphorus. Sodium. Sodium, its major role, first of all, sodium it's abbreviated Na on the periodic table. It's a positively charged ion. Sodium's major role would probably be in maintaining blood pressure. Just like potassium, it's important in fluid and electrolyte balance. It also helps maintain extracellular fluid balance. It helps with acid-base balance, nerve transmission, muscle contraction. So it plays multiple roles. Again, all of these different minerals are interconnected. They all play lots of different roles in the body, but the major role of sodium is probably it's linked to blood pressure. When our blood sodium rises, when we consume a really salty snack or a salty meal, our body will detect that increase in blood sodium, and that will trigger our thirst reflex. That thirst reflex will encourage us to drink fluids, to drink water, until we get that sodium-water ratio balance restored again. And then the kidneys will use that extra water to help excrete the extra sodium. So they'll use that to kind of help dilute out some of that sodium and put it in the urine. Just like urea, you don't want super duper high concentrations of sodium. That can be hard on your tissues. So they want to dilute it a little bit, and they'll excrete water along with that sodium. And to do that, they need you to consume more water. And so that's why you get that thirst reflex when you eat salty foods. The problem with this is that over time, as you constantly consume more and more sodium than you need, your baseline sodium levels in the blood will slowly creep up. And as a result, so will your baseline water levels. And if you have more water in your blood system, that creates more volume. I mean, if you have more fluid going through any sort of pipeline, that's going to increase the pressure in that pipeline. Just think about when you turn a hose on. If there's not much water in it, it comes out as a slow little drip, and there's not a lot of pressure. But if you have it on full force and you have tons of fluid going through that garden hose, it's coming out with a lot of force behind it at the other end. It's the same thing with your blood vessels. So if you slowly over time are consuming too much sodium, that can influence how much water you retain in your circulatory system and thus contribute to higher blood pressure. So that's the link between high blood pressure, or better known as hypertension, and increased sodium in your diet. So make sure that you watch that. I don't have a listing here, but sodium is typically not something that you see people deficient in, at least not in the United States, because there's sodium in just about everything. We eat, as a society, we eat so many processed foods, so many packaged foods, so many foods that have a long shelf life. Things that you wouldn't even think have sodium in them. The next time you drink an iced tea, look at the bottle. The next time you drink a Diet Coke, look at the bottle. You'd be surprised. Lots of those will have 3, 6, even 9% of your daily allowance of sodium. So because we have such a highly processed diet, and sodium is really the key element that is used to help us preserve those foods, and also sodium enhances the flavor of foods and enhances the taste. We tend to see a lot of sodium in our food products. So it's very, very rare to see people in developed nations, especially the United States, suffer from a sodium deficiency. If anything, they're trying to cut sodium out of their diet. Sodium's partner in crime, chloride, is our principal negatively charged ion in the body. Chloride, abbreviated Cl on the periodic table, and it's negatively charged. It tends to travel with our sodium. Sodium chloride is most commonly known as table salt. So it's just your typical crystalline table salt that you use to put on your food. That is a combination of sodium and chloride ions that have bonded together. Since chloride is negative and sodium is positive, opposites attract. So they make that crystalline form structure and bond together, and they don't like to break apart. They can dissolve in water pretty readily because water's polar, and it'll break apart that and allow them to disassociate into their ionic form. So you see sodium chloride land in water and it dissolves, but sodium chloride is actually a pretty tight ionic bond. If you're not dissolving it in a solvent, you can throw it on a fire. It won't melt because that negatively charged chloride ion loves to be bonded to that positively charged sodium ion. So we see this in the salt. There are some other sources of chloride, but salt is the big one that you will see as a source of chloride. And the major role to remember for chloride is that it is the principal component of our stomach acid. Our stomach acid is hydrochloric acid, which is a hydrogen ion and a chloride ion. And so those two combined create that acidic environment of our stomach. It also plays a role in electrolyte and acid-base balance as well throughout the body and in certain fluids. But its major role is creating that really acidic pH of our stomach for digestion of our food. Magnesium, this is really the last of our major minerals. It barely makes it. There's only about an ounce present in our body of a 135-pound person, and most of it is actually stored in our bones. We do have a lot found in our soft tissues and in our heart and in our liver as well. Very little is actually in our body fluids. However, it's kind of a jack of all trades. It plays a role in helping more than 300 enzymes function. It acts as what's called a cofactor, which is much like the B vitamins, how they act as a coenzyme, except a cofactor is like a mineral. It's not an organic compound. And it also directly affects metabolism of potassium, calcium, and vitamin D. So the processing of those minerals and vitamins is directly affected by magnesium. And there's also some interesting studies out there that look at the role of magnesium along with zinc in immune system function. So it does have other peripheral roles, but major functions in enzymatic activity and also processing and metabolizing certain vitamins and minerals. The trace minerals are called that because we don't have very much of them in our body, just a small trace. We don't need very much of them, and we don't, going without them for a little bit generally doesn't result in major problems. Long-term lack of the trace minerals, though, however, can create some major problems, especially depending on your life stage. Zinc, this really works with the proteins in every body organ that we have. It helps to liberate vitamin A from the liver. It's, like I said, it's involved in the immunity, involved in activating our immune system to fight infection. A lot of people will take different zinc supplements. I know Zicam. There's a few different herbal remedies that include zinc that are, people say, oh, it really worked to help cure my cold or whatever. A lot of people put a lot of faith in zinc in helping fight colds and virus infections. But yeah, it really plays a huge role in protein metabolism, protein synthesis and development within the body. We see it playing a vital role in all of our major body organs. And it's found in a variety of meats and grains. With a lot of these trace minerals, certain grains will have them if they're grown in soils that are rich in them. Selenium, iodine, zinc, copper, a lot of these iron, a lot of these different trace elements are really not, we don't need a whole lot of them. And sometimes if we just have a crop that has been grown in these environments of these soils that have trace elements, the crops will take them up, and you'll actually get them from some grains. Iodine, same thing, it's a trace mineral. We don't need a whole lot of it, but it is a very important mineral. We need it for thyroxine. Thyroxine is a hormone that's made by the thyroid, and that helps to regulate our metabolism. people who have different disorders of the thyroid gland, either hypo or hyperthyroidism, can have trouble keeping weight on or losing weight. So there can be issues with thyroid function that directly contribute to the rate at which you burn calories. So yes, I did say calories in, calories out. If you consume calories, you either have to use them or you end up storing them. That's very true. But some people do have disorders where their thyroid will kick up their metabolism a notch, and they actually have a very difficult time holding on to weight because of the rate at which they burn calories. I had a colleague who had cancer, and it had resulted in her losing function in her thyroid, and she, because she didn't catch it right away, she was finding that she gained, I think upwards of 70 or 80 pounds, and she was counting calories, and she's like, I don't understand what's going on, Mary. I'm only having 800 calories a day, 1,000 calories a day. I'm trying not to hardly eat anything because I keep gaining weight. So it can work to your disadvantage either way, whether you're hyper or hypothyroid. Deficiencies in iodine can lead to what's called a goiter. And essentially a goiter is a swelling of the neck. And here I have a picture of it. And you can Google these online to see actual pictures of people who have them. Essentially, since there's no thyroxine being made, you want this hormone thyroxine being made, and it's never actually made because of the iodine deficiency. The thyroid essentially never turns off. It just keeps working and working and working because it's trying to maintain homeostasis, and it's never getting there. So the thyroid overworks itself and just gets larger and larger and larger, just like working a muscle and making it bigger and bigger. And so as the thyroid overworks itself, it gets larger and creates that lump on your neck. Another situation we see with iodine deficiencies is what's called cretinism. A lot of students who are born and raised in America have never heard of this and have never seen it before. But you can see this little guy, has extremely stunted growth. Cretinism, believe it or not, is the single most likely cause of mental retardation and physical retardation in the entire world. A lot of people don't know that. It's estimated to have caused up to 80% of all the mental and physical retardation in the world. It's not other genetic disorders, it's not cerebral palsy, it's not high fevers when you're a baby, it's cretinism. And this is a direct result of women lacking iodine during their pregnancy. Very, very sad to see. To think 80% of this could be prevented by a simple thing as just making sure you have your iodine. But again, remember, not all countries have the infrastructure where they have iodine supplemented in their food supply. In the United States, if you walk down your bakery aisle and buy a big container of salt, it will say right on the salt container, iodized salt. Just about every situation in the United States where we use our salt, we will supplement it with iodine. The iodine will bind in there with the salt structure. And so since salt is so ubiquitous in our diet, if we're using iodized salt in our cooking and in our baking, we all get iodine. We don't need to take iodine tablets. And so we kind of take it for granted that we're always exposed to iodine. But iodine doesn't naturally occur in a lot of different foods. In fact, there's some African countries where there's certain clay-like soils that people will actually eat the soil because it's been found to be so high in certain minerals, including iodine. So they'll actually ingest it because they know of the beneficial effects of eating those soils. They know that there's minerals in there that are good for them. But in the United States, of course, we don't have to do that because we have fortified and enriched our different foods. So you don't really see cretinism in the United States, but point in fact, it is sadly the most common cause of mental and physical retardation in the world. Some more trace minerals. Chromium is thought to help with regulating how insulin processes glucose. Chromium picolinate, I remember maybe 20 years ago now, was a huge dietary supplement. A lot of people were taking chromium picolinate to try and help them lose weight. And there is a little bit of science behind how it can boost the metabolism, but it's, diets, again, just eat right and exercise, and you should get to where you want to be. Again, plants grown in soils that have some will pick up chromium. There's also different seafoods will have them. Same thing with selenium. There's a lot of different seafoods will have a little bit of selenium. Selenium is known to help prevent oxidation of your cells by working with vitamin E. Copper helps to form hemoglobin and collagen, so it helps to make those proteins for us. If you cook with copper pans and pots, you'll actually have some copper leach into the water that you're cooking with or into the food that you're cooking with. Same thing with iron. If you cook with an iron skillet, you will actually get some iron supplementation to your food using an iron skillet. Copper piping also will put copper into the water supply. So those are actually good sources of copper. Any sort of metal that you're using for cooking or for your piping can actually result in it being in your water supply. That's what the Romans had trouble with back in the day. They used lead for pipe systems. Lead was a nice, soft, pliable metal that they could bend easily, but they didn't know lead would cause all sorts of problems, and that's why a lot of those rulers back in the Roman days were thought to be crazy. They thought they had some lead poisoning. So just kind of a little side note there, that any sort of metal you use for your piping is going to leach into your water supply. And you'll notice nowadays, copper piping is still used a lot with water heaters and the like, but most piping now is PVC piping. It's a polymer or plastic, so that you don't have any issues with any sort of leaching, which is a good thing. But again, if it's a metal or a mineral that's good for you, it's not a bad source of that nutrient. Iron, like I mentioned, you can get it from pots and pans and the like. We need iron because iron is found inside those heme centers inside hemoglobin and myoglobin. Hemoglobin is the protein transporter that carries oxygen in the blood. Myoglobin actually does it in the muscle. So myo means muscle. So that's a protein found in muscle cells that holds on to oxygen for us. Lack of iron can result in anemia or pica. Those I mentioned earlier. Pica is craving non-food substances, and anemia is where you have low blood iron or sometimes even low blood count, and it can make you feel chronically fatigued or weakened. Here's my little guy brushing his teeth. That's a little too much fluoride, but he gets the point across. Fluoride helps to form that enamel in our teeth. Overdosing and underdosing on fluoride can result in problems. Too much fluoride can result in fluorosis. Too little fluoride can result in dental caries, which is a fancy name of saying cavities. So you need to make sure you have just that right amount of fluoride. We use fluorinated toothpaste to treat the outside enamel of our teeth, and we drink fluorinated water to treat the internal enamel of our teeth. So we do ingest some fluoride through our drinking water if you're in a municipal drinking system. You should not eat toothpaste, though. Toothpaste has a much higher concentration of fluoride than your water supply, and that can be toxic to you. So especially when little kids are learning how to brush their teeth, you give them very, very, very small amounts of toothpaste, and you monitor them and help them spit and rinse, because you shouldn't be consuming those levels of fluoride because it can be toxic. I've seen a few articles in recent current events where cities are actually starting to vote to stop fluorinating their city water supplies, which to me is just dumbfounding. I know people who, I in fact do not live in a city. I live in the country, and I have a water well, and both my doctor and my dentist are always on me to make sure that I'm giving my children full, ingestible fluoride supplements because of the risk of forming cavities. And I actually have a cousin who didn't realize this, and she lived in the country with her daughter and didn't give her fluoride supplements, and by the time she was 8 years old, her mouth had already cost her about $5,000 because all of her adult teeth were coming in and not forming correctly because she didn't have that fluoride base. And so she didn't have fluorinated water, and now she's got all of these adult teeth that are just full of fillings. So her adult teeth are already kind of behind the curve and very, very expensive. So it really surprises me when I see people voting on this that I don't think are really quite educated. I know there was a study that came out not long ago from Harvard that was linking, well, there are some links between high levels of fluoride to nervous system problems and neuromuscular disorders and things like that. And they were seeing higher levels of neuromuscular problems or neurological development issues in urban city children. And so they've made, I mean, again, this is where the really analyzing science comes in. One study looking at some urban centers at the neurology of one set of kids is not conclusive. I mean, there's many suburban systems, there's many urban systems, there's tens of thousands of municipal drinking water systems, and I have yet to run into one that doesn't fluorinate its water. And so when you see urban centers where there's a few kids that are showing neurological disorders, I think it's a big stretch to all of a sudden correlate that with the fluoride in the water. And again, think about kids today. How many kids are actually drinking water as their main fluid source? Unfortunately, I don't think that's the case. I think it's mainly soda pop and things like that. So, you know, take my advice. Fluorinated water is not a bad thing. And in fact, if you don't have fluorinated water, you're going to probably have a doctor or a dentist recommend that you take fluoride supplements, at least your children, and have your children take it while they're developing that the internal enamel of those adult teeth. So that being said, too much fluoride can be a problem too. So you do have to watch it. Make your own decisions when it comes to fluorinated water. But you know, millions and millions of people have been drinking fluorinated water now for decades in the United States, and we're not seeing neurological damage nearly on a level where I would extrapolate that, you know, fluoride is the culprit. So keep that in mind. Water. So those are the major minerals. Again, make them into note cards. Write 2 or 3 major characteristics of each one, 2 or 3 major sources of each one, and you'll be good to go for the test. I ask lots of questions where I say, you know, this deficiency disease results in lack of iron, or which of the following is a good source of iron. You know, besides your cooking pans, you know, any sort of red meat is a really good source of iron. A lot of them you can really quickly, easily figure out. When you think of iron, sulfur, phosphorus, think about places in our body where we use them, in our cellular structure, in our protein. Where do we find those? So if we're consuming animal products or plant products that have that same biological structure, those are typically going to be good sources of those minerals. Now, water by far and away is the most important nutrient that we're going to talk about in nutrition. And a lot of people really take it for granted. They don't think water is they don't even think of water as a nutrient. But it is. I mean, water is absolutely essential for your body's health. And we need more water per day than any other nutrient. Pound for pound, volume for volume, we need water. There's no way around it. When we look at all these other minerals and vitamins and nutrients that we discussed, you can survive without vitamin D. Yeah, you might get rickets, but you can still survive. You can survive without vitamin C. You might get scurvy, but you can still survive. So when you look at deficiencies in other nutrients, you can survive with deficiencies, and for some of them, you might not even know you are deficient. I mean, have you ever heard of anyone with a selenium deficiency? Probably not. So being deficient in a lot of our different vitamins and minerals really doesn't have a lasting effect. There are some that can have major effects on your body, but it's not necessarily going to kill you. However, water is different. Water is something where you really can't survive more than a few days without water. And if it's hot and you're physically active, you can go down in as quick as a day or even a few hours. You really need water for your body to function. Now, a lot of you are thinking, geez, I never drink water. How am I making it? Well, you're drinking fluid somewhere. You're either drinking milk or juice or soda pop or something. You're eating fruit, which has a lot of water. Even a good juicy steak, I mean, it's got a lot of water in it. So you are consuming liquid fluid somewhere, and that the basis of all of our fluids is water. So you're getting water somewhere, even if you might not be drinking just pure water. So within a day, without any sort of fluid, your body chemistry will actually start to alter immediately, and that will screw up your metabolism as well. Very, very important you're consuming enough water. Water makes up approximately 60% of an adult body weight. This can vary a little bit between person and person, but typically about 2/3. Actually, in the brain, about 80% of our brain and our central nervous system is water. A lot of that's great for sending nerve impulses. Water is a great conductor of electricity, so it's a great conduit for sending nerve impulses. And it also creates a great cushion, so that if we bump our head or knock our brain around a little bit, there's a lot of water in there to help ease the blow of some sort of blow to the head. But overall, our entire body is probably about 60%, 65% water. Where do we find water? It's in our blood vessels. I mentioned in your circulatory system that creates the bulk of the volume is the fluid base. Inside your cells, it's a water base, and also in the chemical structure of different cells, tissues, and organs. I mentioned hydrolysis reactions and dehydration reactions. Water is used for multiple metabolic pathways. It participates in so many different chemical reactions. There's no way to even name them all. So water is a major player in your body and has multiple functions. And here are some of those functions. Why is it so important? Well, it's the conduit of our body. It's the transport mechanism of our circulatory system. It helps to deliver nutrients to our body tissues and remove waste from our body tissues to our kidneys, and carbon dioxide to our lungs. So we need water to help create that circulation and that transport. Water is a great solvent. And what I mean by solvent is being a solvent means things can dissolve into you. Amino acids, glucose, minerals, ions, all of those things easily and readily dissolve into water so that they're easily transportable. It would be hard to transport salt through your blood system if it didn't dissolve in water. So water being a great solvent is a huge tool for us for moving those things around. Even fats. Fats can't travel freely in the blood system, but as long as they're attached to a water-soluble protein, water will dissolve them, and they can transport around in the body just as well as the other things can. Water cleanses the body. It's used to help filter out waste. We use water to help dilute urea concentrations, nitrogenous waste concentrations, salt concentrations. So kidneys use water as a mechanism to dilute those toxic byproducts of our metabolism and make urine, so that we've diluted it down so it's not nearly as toxic to us, and then we're allowed to flush it out through the urination process. Water's incompressibility. What I mean by this is water takes up space. And so when you have water in your joints, when you have water in your spinal cord or your spinal column, it acts as both a lubricant, so you don't have friction between your cartilage and your joints, and you also have a cushion. So when you're jumping up and down, all that cartilage is very spongy, and it holds a lot of water, and that allows it to cushion the impact of the shock of falling out of a tree or getting in a car accident, or if you're pregnant, the amniotic fluid helps to cushion the fetus and help protect it. It lubricates the digestive tract, respiratory tract, all the tissues that you see in your body that have a mucus lining to them. The bulk of that mucus is water. So when you clear your throat like that, you're clearing away mucus that has water in it. That allows you to move away dust and dirt particles from the base of your throat and clear them up and swallow them into your digestive tract and get rid of that bacteria through that acid in your stomach. So we use those mucus coatings. We need those to be moist. We need them to have water to help protect our different body openings. Your eyeball, your eyes have fluid in them inside. If you poke your eyeball open, you'll see that it's mainly made up of fluid. And anyone who's ever been dehydrated before, think back to the last time you didn't get enough to drink or you were a little dehydrated. Did you ever notice that your vision started to blur a little bit, or that it was harder to focus, or you had to squint a little bit? I always ask students this, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I have noticed that before when I haven't had anything to drink for a while. I kind of seem to need to squint to look at the chalkboard," and that's a sign of dehydration. Your eyes have to be kept at the optimal pressure to make sure that your retina and your lens and all the working parts of your eye can focus. And if your eye is not at the right pressure, that's going to bend or skew the image that's seen through your eye and make it hard to focus. So not having enough water in your body can actually impair your vision. We need to see that the amount of water that we take in is equal to our water loss. Therefore, in the hot, humid summer days, we need to very conscientiously drink more fluids. We need more water in our body. If you're actively moving around or exercising, if it's a humid day, any of those things, you need to be very conscientious of how much water you're losing and replace it. Dehydration is typically the problem we see with water. We tend to not have enough water, but you can have water intoxication as well, and that can be very dangerous. Too much water it can dilute the body fluids to where it's hard to maintain electrolyte balance. Typically, you don't see this. Usually, if you're drinking a lot of fluids, your kidneys are on it and processing it and getting rid of it pretty quickly, and you're urinating a lot. But there are some instances. I remember when the video game console, the Wii, came out many years ago already. There was a radio contest where people had to don't pee to win a Wii or some silly thing like that. And they had all these contests come in, and they had to drink, I don't remember how much it was, a gallon of water and not pee. And if you didn't pee, you won a Wii. And this lady actually died, and her family then sued the radio station, of course, and for negligence. And if you drink high levels of fluid and you don't urinate, you can build up water toxicity levels that can actually kill you. So it's an old story, but you could probably find it on the internet. But it was some radio station, I think in the Midwest, I think it was in Kansas or something, where you needed to win a Wii, you couldn't pee or some silly thing like that. So water intoxication can be a problem too. Where do we get our water? Well, a lot of us think right away, well, we get our water from our liquids, and that's where typically the bulk of our liquids, our water comes from, is from our liquids, the different fluids that we drink. But we also get quite a bit from foods. Again, if you're eating a juicy steak, meat or fleshy meat products are very full of liquid. Fruits, apples, oranges, pears, watermelon, cantaloupes, lot of liquid inside our foods. And then also a little unknown source that people forget is water created by metabolism. When you have these dehydration synthesis reactions and these hydrolytic reactions, water is constantly being created and destroyed. We're constantly making water and breaking it down to do these different reactions. And so water is actually a byproduct of our very own metabolism. One interesting example of this is the camel. A lot of people think when they see the hump on the back of a camel that it's water. And point in fact, it's not water, it's actually fat. But indirectly, it is water. The fat, when the camel metabolizes the fat, one of the byproducts of fat metabolism, once you completely break it down all the way, you get energy from it, you get carbon dioxide, and you get water. That when you have complete breakdown of our organic molecules, water is one of the byproducts. So when you think, oh gosh, how do those camels go days and days in the desert without needing water? Well, actually they don't go days and days without water. They actually get water from the metabolism of the fat in those humps on their back. So they're actually creating quite a bit of water from fat metabolism, and they utilize that to meet their water needs. Ways that we lose water. Again, makes sense. When we urinate, that's where a lot of our fluid goes. Our kidneys filter out quite a bit of our water, but also our feces too. Again, you think of your feces. If you've got lots of fiber in your diet, you're going to have a nice, moist bowel movement, and that the bulk of that is water. Or if you have diarrhea, you're going to see a lot of water loss there. The lungs. Anyone who lives in a northern climate or watches a football game in Packer country in the fall will see those football players breathing out, and they'll see all that moisture leaving their lungs. When you breathe out, you release a lot of moisture through the breath that you exhale. And then, of course, your skin. And you can see there's quite a range here on skin, just like your kidneys. Depends on the climate where you live, depends on the temperature, the humidity, activity level. Your skin releases water in the form of sweat for the purposes of keeping your body cool. And it's not so much that your skin gets wet that makes you cool down. Even though your wet skin might feel good to you, the act of getting sweaty is not actually what cools your body. It's the act of the sweat being released from your body and then changing phases, going from the wet moisture on the surface of your skin to evaporating. When water goes from the liquid phase, the liquid water on our skin as sweat, to the gaseous phase, like a steam, that takes energy to do that. And the energy that it takes to go from liquid sweat to evaporating off your skin, that energy is heat energy. So it takes heat energy with it when it evaporates. So the act of sweating, the major function of sweating is not to put water on your skin to cool it, but to put water on your skin so that the evaporation of water on your skin will cool your body. The next time you take a shower, try this. Get out of the shower and just towel off and stand there in your bathroom naked for a while, just naked and dry. And your family will think you're crazy, but just try it. If you're naked and dry, be very conscientious of how you feel. And then the next day, come out of the shower and stand there naked and wet. And just let the water on your skin slowly evaporate off without actually toweling it off. And you'll notice a difference. You'll actually feel colder if you let those water molecules on your skin, if you let them naturally air dry. When they go from liquid to gas, they're taking heat with them. And so you will feel colder standing there naked and wet than if you stood there naked and dry. It's a lot of people, you swim or you've come out of a cold swimming pool or a cold lake and you've experienced this before but probably never really thought about why it was. But that's why. That's the reason why. Your skin, the evaporation of water off your skin is what actually keeps your body cool and keeps that core body temperature down. That's also why it's so hard to cool down in a hot, humid summer day. If the air is humid, that means it's already very saturated with water. If you've got really sticky, heavy air, there's not a lot of place for the water on your skin to go. And so if you've got a humid day and it's hot and you're sweaty and the sweat won't evaporate, your body will still stay hot. And so that's why it's very, very dangerous to be out on a hot, humid day. And this is why you always feel hotter on a humid day versus a not humid day. It can be 100 degrees in Arizona, but people will always say, oh, it's a dry heat. And they're right. In a dry heat, you don't feel like you're as hot because that water evaporates easily. You can be in another climate where it's 100% humidity and only 85 degrees and you'll actually feel hotter. And that's the reason why. The water just can't evaporate off your skin. So how does our body regulate where water goes? Water actually isn't directly regulated in how it moves across membranes. It does have to travel through a channel because of that phospholipid bilayer, and it's not a gated channel. It just can freely move in and out of your cell. But what water does is it basically it moves by a process called osmosis. And this is where water will always flow from where it is of greater concentration to where it is of lesser concentration. So basically it follows the solute concentration. If there's a higher concentration of solutes inside the cell than there is water, water will flow into that cell. If the higher concentration of solutes is outside the cell, that means there's less water out there and water will flow outside of the cell. So the movement of water from where water is of greater concentration to where it's of lesser concentration, it's just a natural process and it's called osmosis. It doesn't take any energy, but we do use energy to regulate our ions and thus indirectly regulate where the water is. Because those ions in dissolved water can actually carry an electrical current, that's why charged ions are called electrolytes. You can, if you've ever stuck your finger in a socket or gotten a static electric shock from getting static on your shoes and touching a doorknob, you know this very well, that we can conduct electricity. We have charged particles in our body that will conduct electrons, and that allows us to be a conductor for a current. And so dissolved ions in that water will allow us to conduct an electrical charge if we're not careful. But that's where we get the name electrolytes when we talk about all those different charged ions in our body, the sodiums and the potassiums. Those are referred to as electrolytes. Minerals, we talked about some of the minerals that play a role in acid-base balance. Just so you know, when we talk about acids and bases, what we mean, just a little overview, a little chemistry here, not a lot, but just to kind of get a sense of what acids and bases are. Water, the elemental structure for water is H2O. It's 2 hydrogen ions and 1 oxygen ion, or excuse me, 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. And when water when we look at water in its purest form, essentially it can dissociate into what's called a hydrogen ion and a hydroxyl ion. And as long as those two are in equal balance, we have equilibrium and we have a neutral pH, a pH of 7. But different minerals and different conditions and different metabolic procedures can increase the acidity of a fluid or the basicity of a fluid. And if you increase the acidic component, that means you've increased the number of hydrogen ions. If you increase the basic component, that means you've increased the number of hydroxyl ions. So slight changes in these pHs can really mess with the structure and function of many metabolic processes and many structures within your cell. Remember that when we discuss proteins, one way to denature proteins is through the use of acids and bases. And once you denature a protein, you physically change the shape of that protein and it will not function properly again. So maintaining appropriate acid-base balance is extremely important. Doesn't always necessarily mean you want to maintain it at neutral. For example, your stomach has a pH of about 2, but you do want to maintain it where it needs to be. You want to maintain that internal balance or that homeostasis. And to do that, we use lots of different mineral salts, like phosphate buffers and the like. There's some sulfate buffers too. And buffers, basically a buffer is just a molecule or a salt that has the ability to gain or lose hydrogen ions to correct for the pH. They basically absorb hydrogen ions or release them as needed to make sure that pH is maintained. The kidneys also help maintain pH by excreting more or less hydrogen ions. Your urine is a little bit acidic, and that's directly due to the kidneys removing the acidic nature of your blood and keeping it in check. And the lungs also can help by excreting more or less carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide does travel in your red blood cells back to the lungs in the hemoglobin, just like oxygen travels to your tissues in the hemoglobin. But there's actually a pretty big chunk of carbon dioxide that is actually dissolved in the blood. Not all of your carbon dioxide waste travels within the red blood cells. Some of it will dissolve in the blood and form what's called carbonic acid. And then when it gets to the lungs, it'll disassociate again from the blood and be released as carbon dioxide. So we do see that happen in the blood where we create an acidic byproduct. And this is just representing the pH scale. The pH scale is, by definition, pH is the negative log of the hydrogen ion concentration. And I know that's a big mouthful for a lot of you, especially if your math skills are weak, but a negative log just means it's an inverse relationship, and log refers to using an exponential scale. We could never count all the hydrogen ions, so we use a logarithmic scale, which allows us to use very, very large numbers and convert them into more manageable numbers. And you can see here, the pH range goes from 0 to 14. So it's a much easier numbering system than to try and count, literally billions and trillions of ions. So pH of neutral is 7. You get down here towards battery acid, that's pretty acidic. Lemon juice, gastric juice, that's your stomach acid, is about a 2. Vinegar, soda water, orange juice. Look at all these things we drink. Coffee, orange juice, soda. Those things are all very acidic. And if you look, urine's also very acidic too. So, if you increase the number of acidic things that you drink, your urine will also be more acidic. And so the kidneys will help keep that homeostasis by releasing more acidic urine. Water is neutral. Milk, saliva is a little bit acidic. Pancreatic juices, these help to neutralize those stomach acids. They're a little bit basic. Bile, baking soda, these things are basic. Household ammonia, that's basic. So you look at these different ranges of different things. If you look at just this little between about 6.8 and 8, they kind of blow up this window here so you can see what the normal blood pH range is. Your blood is about neutral. It's a little bit basic, but it doesn't take much before you get into death. Beyond 6.8 or beyond 8 for a pH, you will die. Your blood will become too alkaline or too acidotic, or lots of times it's caused by different metabolic processes like lactic acidosis can lead to bleeding of the lungs and death. A popular movie many years ago, A Few Good Men, was about some Marines, and the guy in that movie, his lungs started to bleed because of lactic acidosis. He started to ferment sugars and create an acidic byproduct, and that acid in his blood, it just became too acidic, and it literally started to burn his lungs, and he started to bleed and he died. And that was the premise of the murder for that movie, A Few Good Men. So very, very easy to get into those danger ranges and result in death. So how much water do you really need to drink a day? And when you look at this online, or you look at different medical journals, you look at different affiliations or different associations, it seems like everybody has a little bit different recommendation. The DRI meets about 80% of your daily needs for water. The rest will come from breaking down energy-yielding nutrients and from the foods you eat. And what is generally recommended, and again it varies, but men, they generally recommend about 13 cups of fluid a day, and women about 9. And again, that's not necessarily just cups of water. It can be coffee, tea, other beverages as well. Preferably, you want to drink as much of that in the form of water as you can, so that you don't have to process other chemicals, or you don't get added caffeine or preservatives. There's a lot of places out there that will recommend just 8 glasses a day across the board for everybody. But it really varies, and I have a hard time really making a solid recommendation to students because everybody is so different. And for that reason, I don't test on it either. I don't say how many glasses of water do you need in a day, because you could have 20 different answers and they would all be right. Typically, men need more. Typically, athletes need more. The more physically active you are, you need more water. A lot of this just makes sense. If you live in a warmer climate or it's summertime, you need more water. If you tend to be physically active or do outdoor work, you tend to need more water. Those are all things just to think about when consuming your daily beverages. As a general guide, I think these are pretty good standards. But if you're not sure if you're getting enough water, I always tell students, look at your urine. Look at when you urinate, look at the color of your urine. Urine should be kind of a straw yellow color. Granted, only, again, saving being on medications. Sometimes people are on weird medications or eat, certain kinds of foods might discolor your urine. But if you don't have any sort of underlying health condition, or you're not on any sort of special medication that can color your urine, just, a regular person on a regular diet, look for kind of that straw yellow color to your urine. If you've got that straw yellow color, you're probably consuming the right amount of water. If it's almost crystal clear, like you can't see any yellow tint, you might actually be drinking too much water. Usually that's not a problem for people. Usually they're dealing with highly concentrated urine. It's usually a strong yellow color, maybe even a strong smell to it. If you have a strong smell to your urine and it's a very strong, potent yellow color, chances are you're not getting enough water during the day. So that's kind of a good guide to use. And on my consumer corner, kind of a popular issue today, and it's been a popular issue for a while now, is bottled water. You go into a convenience store, you go down the aisle at Walmart, and there's a million different types of bottled water. 1 in 15 households use bottled water, and I would say that number is probably a lot higher now. And they cost anywhere from 250 times to 10,000 times the cost of tap water. And it's not any safer than tap water. A lot of people don't believe me when I say this, but just stop and think about it. When you drink a tap water system, you have a single source point municipal drinking water system that has tons of quality control at that single source site that is feeding pipes throughout a city or some sort of municipal district. But when you have people that are bottling, spring water, you have multiple different sources, multiple different sites, multiple different vendors that are all trying to be regulated by the FDA. And, they're popping up left and right all the time. And they might not be evaluated as often as we'd like to think are being evaluated, or their water's not being surveyed as much. And again, if you're bottling natural spring water, yes, spring water is a wonderful thing, but it's there can be natural compounds in it that haven't been screened for. So if you're just bottling a natural spring, you might not know exactly what you're all getting. And we also do know that you're not getting the fluorination that you would get in a municipal drinking system either. And you're paying so much money for that water when you can just reuse a water bottle, fill it up, rinse it in your dishwasher, and reuse it. Bottled water is no more nutritionally valuable than drinking from the drinking fountain. There's no signs of any sort of nutritional benefit or any sort of health benefit from drinking bottled water over tap water. And if you like to carry I carry a bottle around with me. If you like to carry a bottle around with you just to make sure you drink more water, I think that's a wonderful idea. Just reuse it. Buy a nice water bottle, a metal bottle, water bottle, or those BPA-free plastic water bottles, and just run it through your dishwasher every once in a while and reuse it. When you look at an average bottle of water costing $1.59, and a lot of them cost more than that, if you just bought one every day, that would be $580 a year. And if instead you took that money, that $1.59 that you wasted every day, and invested it in a mutual fund or some sort of retirement fund at an 8% return, in 30 years, you'd have $77,000. I mean, just think about that. Every time you go and you buy water, what are you getting for that water? I mean, it's bad enough when I give the soda example about all the phosphates you're getting and the caffeine and the sugars and all those things you don't need, and you're wasting all that money. Well, here, you're getting something that you need and it's very good for you, but it's free. It's free everywhere you go. There's drinking fountains. So invest a couple bucks in a nice water bottle and just constantly fill it up. Some of them will have hooks on them. You can hook them on your backpack, and look at all the money you'll save. And if you really do find yourself spending money every day on bottled beverages, try and break that habit and just earmark that money for a savings account every month, and you'll be surprised how quickly the money adds up. So drink from the tap. It's just as good for you, and it's a lot cheaper than buying bottled water.